So next up in my series of Siege of Winterfell videos, I'm going to do tier lists for each of the different unit types. The reason for this is most people nowadays tend to run mono refinement. So in Siege of Winterfell, you will mostly see people running 3 marches of the same unit type. So bracketing those unit types together and talking about which commanders are best is, in my opinion at least, more important than having them all together and then talking about them in a more mixed situation. Because whilst you can have people running mixed formations, if they have, say, total attack reduction refinement, or maybe running 2 marches of one unit type and 1 march of another unit type, because you have the high priority commanders left to run that 3rd march rather than the 3rd choice commanders to run the main unit type. If you have, say, 320% infantry attack and 320% infantry health in your refinement, if you run a different unit type to that, it will just be a lot of stats that you have to make up for with those commanders. So monotype is the prevailing build in Siege of Winterfell. So I have all the commanders here listed out, and I'm just going to go through it alphabetically. In each of these tier lists, there will be likely repetitive talking points, and if you watch all of them, you will probably hear me repeat myself a lot, and I'm probably just going to have to, because realistically people will just pick out the video that corresponds with their account. So talking as if the videos will be watched in sequence is probably not really possible. So to start off, Andrea, very easily mid-tier. She has 180% each infantry stat. She has 180% of each infantry stat, but she has a fairly middling active, in my opinion. It's not bad, but in the same note, it isn't good, in my opinion. Of course, if you're hitting spear, which is what you're going to want to be doing with 3 mono inf marches, if you're hitting a cavalry march, you're going to want to be getting off that march as soon as possible, so the latter part of that active is mostly irrelevant if you're playing correctly, in my opinion. So it's just 1,200% inf health, which is alright, but she'll mostly be there to serve as a stat provider for infantry marches. Annie is fine. She has a 1,300% heal on her active, which is pretty good actually. That's one of the highest scaling actives that is now in Siege of Winterfell. But her stats are, of course, significantly lower than the likes of Andrea, only giving 90% of each stat, given the fact that she is total statted. Arya, for similar reasons, will be bottom tier. There'll just be much better alternatives. She has a 450 flat damage coefficient active, but the stats she gives just aren't good enough. She'll have a place in the likes of free-to-play formations, but not in those for well-built-out accounts. Baelish is one of the best commanders in this game mode. I can't show it properly because I only have him grey, but at gold, he'll give 120% of each stat. He'll increase your normal attack damage by 180%, and he'll have a passive ability that gives you a 40% chance to attack a second time when he's in the march. So this will give you very good synergy options by pairing him with Jaime potentially, who has the crit passive, but even without him, he'll have good stats, very good passive ability, and a good active ability too. So you could argue he belongs in S tier. If you pair him with Jaime, even with an inf build, he probably will. I'll leave him in A tier for now. Barret is pretty good. It's 120% each inf stat, and he has a 40% increased counterattack damage active. He'll mostly serve as a low priority stat giver for the 2nd or 3rd spot in infantry marches, realistically. Cersei is one that might be a bit controversial in how I rank, but I don't think she's very good in Siege of Winterfell now with her new active ability. She'll give 120% all stats. In this context, it would just be infantry though, so it's the same stats as something like Barret. So she has no benefits to Barret. purely because of her stat giving. So her active ability then has to be so much better than him that she justifies going up a tier above him. But her ability increases all the damage you deal by 50% and gives you CC removal and immunity, which is good, but it only lasts for 4 seconds, and it's just too short of an effect. If this lasted for 8 seconds, 10 seconds, this would be a very different story, but it doesn't. So something like the skill damage increase there, yes, you're increasing your skill damage by 50%, but the fact it increases it by 50% for 4 seconds, you can't generate enough rage to actually cast the skill in that time, so it's basically 0% because you'll never get the use out of that buff whatsoever. So Cersei, her old ability was a lot better, and now I just don't think she's very good realistically at all. Chris is very similar to what I said about Barret. 120% all imp stats. He's got the awakening for the army size, and everyone will have him there, which is a positive. His active is very meh. Again, he serves the same purpose of him being a low priority active, but good stat buffer, particularly for low spending imp builds. Dany is the best commander in Siege of Winterfell by far. She has 6,000% scaling on her active ability at max. It does 1,200 damage coefficient to 5 targets, and she'll also regenerate rage whilst doing that, so you can cycle back to her active quicker, alongside giving 120% all total stats. So she's just absolutely ridiculous. She will be in this top tier for every single build. You will want your Lord stats with Dany if you have her, without fail, in whatever build you're running also. Daeron will also belong up there with her, and I'm also going to put Sinara up there already, going against the alphabetical ordering of this, mostly because it's necessary to talk about her alongside Daeron, because Daeron synergizes with the block mechanic, which is exclusive to Sinara in this game mode. So Daeron gives 240% imp stats, which is the best you'll get from anyone. That alone pretty much will put him in top tier. But he also has 180% increased normal attack damage for 5 seconds. But the big thing about him is each time the commanded troops block an attack, their infantry attack increases by 400% for 3 seconds, stacks up to 10 times. So it's a very short duration buff, but it can stack really high. And if you're getting attacked by a lot of people, this will stack really high, because if we look at Sinara, first of all, her active is good. 1,800% imp attack, 5 seconds is very solid. 180% all imp stats, very good also. When the commander is deployed, the commanded troops can block 20% of the normal attack damage that they take. So as far as I understand it, this basically just means you take 20% less normal attack damage. And every time you get normal attacks, it will count as a block. So Daeron, if he's present with a Sinara lineup, you'll just passively be ramping up this imp attack permanently, and you can sort of envision it as if you're being attacked by 5, 6, 7 people, you will have plus 4,000% imp attack permanently stacked as long as you're being attacked. And that will then help with counter-attack damage, and you'll just snowball from there, where you'll just mow down people that are trying to kill you if you have this Daeron Sinara lineup going. And then next up, Feis. Feis, he actually has a better active ability than Barret and Chris, so he has 1,200% inf health on his active, which is better than both of them. It's the same stats as them. The problem is, at the time of recording at least, he isn't awakenable, so you're losing out on army size. And since the stats they provide passively are the same, I'm going to keep him in a low tier just because of the awakening army size. If he does get awakened, he will actually be one of the better, probably the best C tier commander for this. And there are arguments to be made that he's better than Chris or Barret. I just think the extra army size, you can then filter that into better actives, and his active isn't quite good enough to justify the lack of army size. Hayley is also in this bracket of free-to-play inf commanders. She probably has the best active ability of all 4 of them, maybe a bit worse than Feis, arguably. She has 60% increased normal attack damage for 5 seconds and the same 120% all imp stats. I like Hayley. If you're picking between her, Feis, Barret, Chris, I would edge her over all of these, honestly. Probably edge her above Annie also, although that's a bit more debatable. And it'll depend on the lineups you're running and the synergies and the placement and active sequencings and stuff like that. Jaime is a sort of awkward one to tier due to the fact he only gives spear stats, of course. So you'll be gaining no stats and a mono inf lineup from him at all. His active ability will also be useless to you. His passive, though, is very good, and if you can get synergy with this, with something like Hayley's ability, you can actually get pretty good value out of him. If you have Baelish, and this is like a whale build, you're really gonna skyrocket his effectiveness up into one of these top tiers. For general use, though, somewhere around C tier. Jon, I'd say, is an A tier, 120% total stats. He will give you a buff, which at max will reduce the normal attack damage you take by 50% and increase the counter attack damage you deal by 80% for 5 seconds. I don't think this active is incredible, but it helps you play that role as being incredibly hard to kill unless you play that tank role to the best of your abilities. If he's below gold rarity, though, he's totally unusable, of course. Then Julien. I've actually seen the light a little bit on Julien, I'd say, in the past few days since I uploaded one of my last videos. The reason for this is I didn't think of his active in this way until it was suggested to me, but his damage coefficient is very good on that skill. His stats are okay, a bit less than that 120 baseline we tend to be wanting to look for, but the normal attack damage taken by 40% part of his active ability, the way it reads to me at least, is it's applying a debuff to the target. So if you hit someone with that active in a situation where you're pincer attacking them with 15 other marches, all those 15 marches are going to be gaining that plus 40% normal attack damage on that target. And if that's the case, in scenarios like that, Julien is honestly one of the best actives in the game. And I probably should have tiered him a bit higher in my active tier list. It's very hard to tell if this is how he works practically due to the nature of there not being Siege of Winterfell reports and being able to see specifics like that. But I remember previously he debuffed himself, and some people have thought that mechanic might have carried across. I remember last Siege of Winterfell season, we had someone in our alliance ask the VIP if he debuffed the target or debuffed himself, and they did say the target. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's just the information I have. I'm going to choose to interpret it as it applies as a debuff, and in that case, I think he's very, very good, honestly. Kevin, I think he's meh, personally. He reduces normal attack damage on his lineup by 80% for 5 seconds. He has meh stats. If you have meh stats, I think you need to have an incredible active to make up for it. And I just don't think Kevin quite has that. You could run him with third lineups with healers to keep that lineup alive a bit longer or something like that. You might have niche uses in that sort of sense, but for me, he is a bottom tier commander for inf lineups. Lareo, I'm actually going to put in C tier, which somewhat goes against things I said about Feis, but Lareo just has a much better active, so he has 900% inf attack for 5 seconds and a 350 damage coefficient targeted skill, which is, as far as free-to-play commanders go, very, very good for actives. The issue is that he's not awakened yet, so you're losing out on that army size. If he gets that army size, he honestly might go up to here. Until then, he'll remain here. I do think he really does have a role in a lot of mid to low spending inf lineups. Latz will go up in A tier. She has 180% all imp stats. She has a good active with good damage attached to it and a big defense buff as well. nothing too crazy you can do with her synergistically. She just has a lot of raw value attached to her. Leila is similar to what I said to Jaime. She's going to be in the same tier because of that. She's another one where if you have the F5 commanders to synergize with her, she will skyrocket in the ranks. So if you have Daenerys, she will go up to a S tier because Daenerys is just so good. Without Daenerys, she's probably bottom tier because there's no actives that really make her worthwhile realistically. But I'm going to put her in the middle just because of that niche she has. You could do things with her like run with Rhea or Julien or something like that, but the fact she only gives cav stats is, of course, a huge negative if you're running mono-inf. Margaery is another case of giving off-unit stats, so she'll be giving spear stats only, and I can't show what she gives at gold, but at gold, this heal on her active will be 4,300% coefficient, which is the second highest coefficient by over 2,000 scaling of any active in this entire game mode. The only thing better than her is Daenerys. So if you have her gold, you could make an argument to run her in, say, your third lineup and have it be just a healing lineup to try and keep your other two marches as healthy as possible. I wouldn't personally ever set up that way because of the amount of stats you're losing out on, but I know people that do set up that way, and I do really see the argument for doing so. She is the closest thing we have to Simon in the old Siege of Winterfell, where it's just a huge value heal. She's just, of course, a lot harder to get to a point where that heal can be as influential as Simon's used to be even at Grey. Mengo is going to be mid-tier. I'm going to talk a lot about Mengo in a lot of these upcoming videos, which may surprise people, but Mengo actually is weirdly one of the better commanders in this game mode. So his active ability is actually pretty solid. It's 900% total attack for 5 seconds. It's not great, but 900% attack is good. He has meh stats passively, but this movement speed increase is an actual movement speed increase. It's not a march speed increase. So if you have like 30% march speed, it will increase your movement speed according to your march speed. So it will add 30% on to say like 200%. So you're getting a 15% movement speed increase or something. This will legitimately increase your movement speed by 30%, and you can really feel it on the map. And when you're facing off against alliances that have, say, their package runner using Mengo with a mono cav march and lord stats, it's literally impossible to catch that march unless you have Mengo yourself, even when they're carrying the package, especially if you're imp, this is the case. So even if you're only ever going to use him as a niche pick into matches you're trying to win and you need to chase down the package runner and ensure they can't just run away and get too much distance on the package to make it so you can't retrieve it, he's always going to have a role. And maybe this is a bit unique to my own alliance in terms of the matches we end up finding ourselves in, but there were multiple matches last season at least where people putting Mengo in all their marches or in one of their marches was just a total necessity, or we just had no chance because the package running with Mengo Cav now is just crazy, and you need to have him yourself to be able to counterplay it. It's just how it is. Night King, I think, is very good. Not sexy, but he'll cast an AoE on 5 targets that will stop them from doing anything for 3 seconds, so 15 seconds total of negating all damage, which in terms of a damage swing, it's a very hard thing to visualize, but it's probably approaching the ballpark of Gold Daenerys in terms of how much of a swing that actually is if you're hitting skills and stuff like that. It's definitely not as good as Daenerys, of course, but if you think about the normal attacks you're stopping, that alone is 1,500% coefficient, which is already better than any damaging ability there is. It would only be behind Sansa, Margaery, and Daenerys. So I do think Night King, very, very good, just not fun. You will not score high on the Elam rankings because of running Night King, but he's very good at helping your alliance win. I'll do a bunch at once. Tyrion, Raymond, Sabrina, they're all terrible, in my opinion. Not much more to say. They have lower stats because their totals and all their actives are just very, very meh. I really would not advise running any of these in any circumstances if you can at all avoid it. Soren, however, he'll still be in this bottom tier, but his active is actually weirdly good. It's a 650 coefficient heal. His stats are so bad, you can't put him in a decent tier, plus no one has him awakened at all. But he is weirdly better than the likes of Tyrion, Raymond, and Sabrina, just because of that active. Rhea is the best active ability that mid-spender inf players will have available to them. They will want Rhea being the chief commander of their Lord March, in my opinion, because of how good that active ability is. This will be a common theme with Salma and Patello for their respective marches also. Why can I not find Rhea? Here she is. So 90% increased normal attack damage and 1,800% inf attack for 5 seconds. Those two will of course exaggerate each other, so you're getting plus 90% increased normal attack damage on top of that hugely boosted inf attack simultaneously. So it synergizes with itself, which is a real rarity with pretty much everything else in this entire game mode now. And she of course has that maximum available infantry stats also. Sandor, his active is significantly better than Jon and Cersei's in my opinion. He'll do 1,350 damage coefficient, and he'll also have a flat damage reduction attached to him by 50% at max for 5 seconds. That is a very, very good ability for damage and damage reduction both. So he is right in these upper echelons of best picks. Seg is sort of like a better Arya. He has 700% damage coefficient on his active. It's just mess stats. There will tend to be better options than him, but his active is actually pretty solid, and there's not really any shame in using Seg if you're a lower spending player. Senelle, similar to what I've said about Leila and Jaime, I guess she probably belongs exactly where Leila does. I would say she's probably unusable without Daenerys. But if you have her, you probably have Daenerys. And if you have Daenerys, she'll be in one of these top tiers because of how hard she can exaggerate Daenerys' damage, because you can queue her right before Dany in the ordering and skyrocket her active damage because of that. Because this will be 8 seconds of plus 180% skill damage, I believe, and that lasts long enough to actually have it hit the Dany active. So Senelle, Leila, Daenerys, if you have those three, regardless of unit type, should be your Lord March. It's just such a ridiculous combination. For a general imp tier list though, she'll be in C tier. Sansa, she's a weird one in that she of course only has bow stats, but her active is the third highest scaling active in terms of healing or damage, raw coefficient, at 2,150 coefficient total in the game mode. And because of that, especially for free-to-play players, she really has a role as the chief commander in that first spot in terms of active sequencing, because her heal is just so good. If you're a lower spending player in a big alliance or something like that, and you want your role to be supporting all the players around you that are bigger than you, if your goal is just trying to help your alliance win, then Sansa will actually be pretty damn good because of that. I will put her probably in the upper areas of C tier as a result of that. And I think overall, this will be my mono infantry tier list. There are definitely some things people will disagree with and can shift up and down, and I will have a video coming out when I've done all the tier lists of all my recommended lineups according to each account setup, but also each spending level. So if you're a max account, if you're a mid spender, if you're free to play, I'll cover that all in this video when all these tier lists are wrapped up.